1 p.m. on the East Coast. We're going to get started. I'm going to give a few more seconds before we get started. I'm going to use a presentation here to help you follow along, and so that you know what's coming. As people keep joining, I'll use the time to actually thank a few people, a number of board members of CHCI that have helped develop this new program. Also the Mellon Foundation for getting on board with this new phase of our collaboration model in between humanities centers and institutes. And also all the PIs and the people who have participated in the Global Humanities Institutes, which was our previous program that we're now phasing out, because all the work they did and what they created has really inspired a lot of the changes in where we are now. So I wanted to acknowledge their work. And I wanted to thank all of you for being here, especially CHCI members who've been supporting what we've been doing for a number of years now. So I'll get right into it and explain the agenda for the next 45 minutes or so. There'll be two parts to this meeting. In the first one, the longer part, I'm going to talk quite a bit about the initiatives and explain what they are and why you would want to join and what this involves. And then we'll take 15 minutes. We might be able to stay a little longer in order to take any questions that there are, whether they are practical or general about this new program. So in the first part, just so that you know what's coming, we're going to talk about the initiatives in general, what they are. Then we'll talk about the two specific initiatives that we're launching now that will begin in 2025. Then we'll be talking a bit about the activities that are going to be part of those initiatives and the expectations from those who are going to participate in it. Then we'll explain what are the benefits of joining those initiatives and why you would want your program or project to be a part of this. And then we'll get into things that are much more practical and about how to join. We'll talk a little bit about the timeline and about funding support that's available for both initiatives. So getting into what the CHCI initiatives are. So I have a very basic definition here of what they are. An initiative is it's a global cohort or group or network, whatever you want to call it, of humanities programs and projects that are focusing on a common theme. Now, what all CHCI initiatives have in common, they have shared features, is that they focus on, and here I'm taking a shortcut, being aware of, some of the connotations coming from the engineering and the science that goes with that, but focusing on a global challenge. We've talked about topics of global import is another way of saying it, and you'll know what I mean when I get to those two specific initiatives that we are going to start with. The other shared feature of all initiatives is that they focus on humanities practices in relation to those themes, how those themes can help us understand those issues or address them or question them, contest them. This is really something that's at the core of all the projects and programs that are going to join those initiatives. And by that we mean practices such as translation, critical reading, interpretation. Those are really at the core of the projects that we invite to join the initiatives. Now, another common feature of all CHCI initiatives is that they are based on a very broad definition of the humanities and a broad definition of research, to the point that our previous collaboration program was a research collaboration program, and it's not a term that we're using here so that we can be as inclusive as possible in terms of the range of projects that we want to join. So let me say a word first about the humanities. We have a very broad definition of the humanities for this program, including the arts on one hand, including the social science on the other, and for projects that are like collaborative, it would include as well other participation of other organizations in collaboration with a CHCI center or institute, which can be libraries, museums, NGOs, different groups whose work is sometimes considered to be adjacent to the humanities, but that we welcome in this program as part of collaboration with centers and institutes. And as for research, the broad definition that we're relying on is one that includes in research, for instance, public humanities programs that we conceive as a form of co-created knowledge, and it would include as well basic research. Now, I'm going to call on Stephen Best, president of CHCI, to say maybe a little more about the overall goal of the initiative and this very inclusive approach, and more of the thinking that's behind this new model before I get into the details, the specific details of how this is a program that's different from the Global Humanities Institutes. So Stephen, I'll pass it on to you.
Okay, thanks, Guillaume. So I'll try to be brief and just talk very generally about the pivot. Our Global Humanities Institutes, which were funded by the Mellon Foundation, really allowed our sort of centers in the network and centers and institutes within the network from different regions of the globe to kind of collaborate on research projects that were focused on a very particular theme or project. The GHIs were really valuable to those who participated. It allowed centers and institutes to go very deep into a project, but they were sort of limited in terms of their impact throughout the wider network. So the hope with the pivot to initiatives is that CHCI could sort of could move in the direction of coordinating the research projects across a much broader range of interested centers and institutes, and provide a kind of flexible and inclusive platform based upon what institutes were already planning to do for the forthcoming year, if they were going to address the themes of the initiatives, sort of through their local programming, public humanities work, and kind of multinational research projects in sort of the old model of the GHIs. So like that's the goal, which is to sort of within CHCI as a network to have like broader participation across between institutes. That's largely what the sort of ethos behind the pivot from the GHI to the initiatives. And if I have more to say as the meeting unfolds, I'll add my 2 cents. But that's the essence of the pivot, and why we're trying to kind of affect this move to what we're calling initiatives.
So specifically talking about the differences of how the initiatives are different from the GHIs, which for many of our CHCI member is the framework that they have in mind when they think about CHCI programs for the last few years. So as Stephen was already hinting at, the main difference is that the GHIs generally involved 4 or 5 partners per Global Humanities Institute, and the initiatives are much more open. It's actually virtually there is no limit to the number of people we want to, or program projects that we want to participate. And one of the consequences of that is that because, and I'll come back to that, because the GHIs involved were based on the process of selection of proposals. It means that we have, instead of having very specific questions that are coming from the membership, we offer to the membership very broad themes that we're going to get to in a minute, that are umbrellas under which a range of various projects and program can find their place. So that's one main difference. It means also that the process is not competitive. We'll still, we'll want to check that people who want to participate, their program or their project aligns with the general theme. That's something we'll do. But any CHCI member that has a program or is developing a program around those questions who want to join is welcome to. Now, we'll also get to funding support. Obviously, we don't have infinite funding to support everyone, so that part of the process for those who seek funding is going to remain competitive for reasons that are obvious, just because we need to make some choices. But I'll say more about that in a couple slides. One other very important difference is that the participating program and project retain their autonomy. They develop and they are implemented according to their own timeline. And what the initiative is going to be is a set of plenary activities that are going to be coordinated and facilitated by CHCI for all the members of an initiative to come together around a number of activities that I'm going to get to in a few minutes. So before I do that, I wanted to say a few things about the two specific initiatives with which we are launching. I am going to paste a couple links that Aaron already put on, but for the people who joined later, there are specific pages for both initiatives, and you can pick either of them if you want to have a look. They are fairly similar. They differ in the examples that they use, and also because there are different themes, there are some elements that differ. And I don't want to repeat what's on there. You can read this on later. I just want to insist on a couple of points building on what's on those pages. So you'll see on those pages that we have identified areas of focus under the two themes, and we also have given examples of types of programs and projects that we envision being part of this. So I wanted to say a few things about that and insist on the fact that these are just examples, and you're not limited to those. Whether we're talking about the questions, the specific questions that would go under an initiative, or whether we talk about the forms of the programs or the projects that you might want to bring to this. We actually, when we design this, we do actually count on you and the projects and the programs you develop to help us define the questions that fall under the broad thematic umbrella that we have proposed here. Similarly, for the examples of the types of projects and programs that we're giving, you're not limited to those. As with the theme, we trust in the creativity of our membership and to define the activities and the practices that would be best suited to address and problematize and question the themes that we're proposing here. So I wanted to say that we've tried to give a number of examples, and we'll give more specific examples now of projects that you can refer to for inspiration, to get a better sense of what it is that we're looking for. And I'm going to share a link right now. I don't want to spend too much time on the examples that we're giving, but still want to say a few words. So here is another link that's going to open a Google document in which we have compiled a number of examples that you can look at later. For the first initiative, the one about human craft in the age of digital technologies, I've pointed to a number of projects. Many of you will be aware of the grant, the call for proposal of the NEH around creating centers around artificial intelligence and the humanities. So these are much bigger projects, but if you look at them under the type of activities and focus that they have, they are dealing with a number of questions that we're really interested in to be part of this. You'll see in that document there are other examples that are coming from smaller grants from the NEH around the question of AI. So this could also inspire you. We suspect that a number of you have also applied to those grants and might have projects that they wanted to work on that were not successful because of the limited funding that the NEH had to give for this year. And you'd be welcome to reuse that or part of it or refashion that in order to join the initiatives. There are some examples too that are given here for the global justice and humanities practices. One that comes to mind is what the project that I developed in the wake of a Global Humanities Institute on global racism that is just concluding now. And we just attended the last event of that Global Humanities Institute, and they're thinking of doing a network around global racism that would bring together international partners and HBCUs based on the work that they've done. They're thinking about developing a reader. They're thinking about faculty workshop around the question of global racism. All of those are good examples of projects and programs that could find their place under an initiative. And then there are some more examples of social justice, global social justice program that we give on that page. So I'll let you explore that. We wanted to give you some references that you can look at in order to think about your own programs and projects. So now I want to say a bit about the activities and the expectations for participating projects and programs. So as I mentioned before, each participating project would retain its autonomy and keep its own agenda. So we're very aware of how overworked many people are, of the number of projects that they do, and the last thing we want to do is to add more work to a project that exists already. So when we think about the activities that are going to be what we call plenary activities, meaning activities that bring together all participants into an initiative, we want them to be based on work and outcomes from your programs that you're already doing. So pretty much, and that's the reason why activities and expectations are on the same slide. The expectation is that you participate in those plenary activities, and that's pretty much it. So I want to say a few more words about those activities to give you a sense of what they are. There will be plenary workshops and sessions. Some are going to be virtual. The first one will be a virtual workshop in early spring, in which we will bring everybody from one initiative together, and we'll share more about what the activities are going to be during that workshop in the coming weeks. And then there are going to be in-person events, and we are adapting our annual conference, our annual meeting, to have a full day dedicated to sessions around the initiatives, so around each individual initiatives, but also sessions in common, especially as they deal with questions of programming and research that are more common to both initiatives. And this will be in person, and I'll say more about that when we talk about funding a little later. And finally, there's going to be a range of online platforms. Some of them are going to be geared toward putting together and sharing resources in relation to the theme and in relation to programming. There might be listservs to help with networking. And there will be an online platform that will serve to disseminate the outcomes from your projects, to amplify them and to distribute them within the CHCI membership and beyond. So, and we would expect, the expectation here would be that you contribute to all of those things through sharing the work that you do and through sharing the resources that you develop with other participants in the initiative. So as I said before, the expectations are pretty simple. It's participation in those plenary activities and contributing to those shared resources and platforms that we're going to develop online. So now I wanted to switch to the much more practical questions, and I'm going to switch here the screen that I shared to go directly on the form that we have on our website, because I want to talk about how you can join, and that will serve as my going through the form is going to serve as my guide to say more about how you can join. So let me switch here. Did it switch? Do you see a web page? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to switch here to this page, and you can see the URL here, which is at initiative/participate. And I'm going to say just a couple words about what's on this page, because there are more examples here. There is more. You can also refer here to description of the themes. I'm going to scroll very, very quickly here. There are some information about eligibility. I'm going to say a few words, who you can partner with, about the participants in your programs and projects. There's more about expectations here. I just want to get to the form here and on how to join. So, because this is going to help me talk about the requirements and what else you need to be doing. So there is one form that you can use for to join both initiatives if you have a program that you think might qualify for both. And in the examples that we've given, there are actually programs that could qualify for both those themes that are both about kind of digital technology and justice, global justice. So this is a possibility. Just submit the form twice if that's the case. You'll see here, I use an example here because I'm in Madison, so I pick a member who's in Madison, that in order to submit a form, you need to be a CHCI member. As I said before, you can collaborate with organizations that are not CHCI members, but one participant, collaborator needs to be a CHCI member. Then it's very simple. It's just a matter of giving us the title of your project and a description. Here there are more detail, 3 to 5 pages, and we give more detail about what needs to be included of the project that already exists, if you're running a program already, or that you plan on developing. And that's about it. If you already know what you want to do, it's already funded, and you don't need financial, so don't want to record financial support, that's pretty much it. You can ignore the financial support part here and just submit. I'll talk more about the financial support in a second. Before I do that, I want to talk more about the project. Just to reiterate that it can be existing project or project that you're in development. Actually, when we think about the plenary sessions that are going to bring everyone together, I think there's going to be a great benefit, and I'll go back to benefit in a second, a great benefit for those of you who are developing programs to be able to talk with other program leaders who are in that process and get ideas from them and exchange and rely on them and share your questions with them in order to develop your own projects. So we're very much looking for programs that do not exist yet and are being developed. That being said, there is a time frame to the initiatives. So we are looking to have projects that will be created within the next year, at least by the end of 2025. So it's not like, you could, I mean, in theory, you could join the initiatives for the purpose of developing a program that would come to fruition later. But we want to help develop programs that we will see being implemented during the duration of the initiative, so that they can contribute more to the initiatives. Before, and let me switch back to my slide. Before I talk about funding support, I skipped a slide, but that's okay, because that would work well now. I want to explain why you would want to join the initiative before I get to the funding support question. So this is more developed on the webpage that we shared earlier, but there are multiple reasons, and I've tried to summarize them why you would want your project to be a part of this. So the first One is around networking and exchange. I've already alluded to that. CHEI will take care of facilitating this aspect of things, like all the other ones actually. And it's an opportunity for you to exchange about people working on similar program or programs that might be different in nature, but are about the same theme, about the substance of the work that you do, about the themes, but also about the nuts and bolts of putting those programs together and managing them and learning from others different approaches, different ideas. So this is very much about networking and exchanging around those themes. I think in some cases, our hope is that it would also result in collaboration in people that you were not planning in the first place, but with people that you're going to meet and make bridges in between different programs. Can totally see how you would find among other project leaders people who can be collaborators or guest speakers or workshop leaders for your own program. So that's something that we see as a benefit. As I also mentioned before, one of the goals is to develop and use resources that will be shared in common, and we will facilitate that process. So any resources that's developed or that help you develop your program can be shared through a digital interchange that we're going to build and ask you to contribute to. And another benefit is going to be amplifying and communicating your own projects and programs. And this goes both ways, I think. And what I mean by that is that on your own campus, I think it will give the hope that participating in the CHEI initiative will give a global international dimension to what you're doing, that you can point to in saying that those projects are part of a much larger enterprise that is managed by an international organization. And then externally, what we offer is to help you share the outcomes and what you're doing, the events and what's happening in your programs using the CHEI platform and having us helping you disseminate within the CHEI membership, but also with our affiliates, the work that you're doing. And finally, I would say a benefit, which is an indirect benefit, is that by participating in the initiatives, you are participating in CHEI's advocacy effort for humanities centers in general, for their programming and for their research. We plan on using the outcomes of the initiative and what we're going to learn from it to develop much more general resources that we can use and that you'll be able to use in order to advocate for your own projects, whether it's with university administrators and sponsors. We want to make a case for humanities research through this program, and you will benefit from that indirectly at the tail end of this project. Now, we're almost 30 minutes in, so I want to say a few things about funding support, because this is also pretty different from the GHIs, and it will be, I think, understandable because of the different nature of this program. So as I mentioned before, the funding support is limited for each initiative. We hope to be able to support up to 12 projects per initiative. And as you can see on the form that I was looking at before, I might go back to that. There are different levels of funding that are suggested, and that represent the range of scales of projects that we welcome as being part of the initiatives. So we give those at $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, and $25,000 as guidelines. It doesn't need to be exactly that. These are guidelines that will help us categorize types of projects when we look at them, and we're trying to distribute that support. What's different from the GHIs is that in order to be able to fund more projects, and also in the spirit of inclusion that's based on solidarity between institutions, we are asking members that are in tier 2 and 3, meaning those that have the bigger budget as humanities centers and institutes, to provide matches, financial matches, if they are looking for funding support. And I can say more about that in the Q&A afterwards. The one thing I wanted to add too is that we're asking you, if you're requesting funding support, not to budget travel to go to the annual meeting. There is separate funding for that. that will be available to those who receive funding support for their project. We will take care of helping them attend the sessions that we say is an expectation of participation. We want them to be able to attend those sessions at the annual meeting. And I can say more about specifically where the annual meeting is going to be next year and the dates in a second. And finally, there is a deadline to apply for funding to request the support, and that's December 1st of 2024. So before we get to the Q&A, we're past the 30 minutes now. I just wanted to summarize for you, if you had to have some takeaways from everything that I've said, is first that participation is open to existing and developing programs involving at least one CHCI member. There is a website that has a lot more information. I put the address here. I'm guessing it's open in your browser for many people. And I wanted to give a timeline as well here, just to summarize everything. There is a timeline. There is a deadline for requesting funding support. We'll accept people who don't apply for this funding support and want to share, participate, and join until the end of this year. Then we expect that by February 1st, we'll announce what the cohorts are, who are all the members, and that will include those who need funding support and those who don't. So we will get back to everyone by then. Then I wanted to give a sense of the first activities we're talking about. The plenary virtual workshop that I mentioned before is going to be in early spring. I can't put a very specific date yet, but I would suspect early March probably. We don't want it to be too close to the annual meeting, which is going to be in June. We haven't shared publicly, I think, yet the exact date of the annual meeting. I do hear it's going to be from June 23rd to 27 in Berlin. We can't share dates yet for the following annual meeting because the initiatives are going to keep going in 2026, and there will be other sessions around those two initiatives at the following annual meeting. Our expectation is that it's going to be on the East Coast of the United States. I don't have much more specific information to share at this point. So that's, and there will be also more virtual sessions in 2026. So that's a summary of everything that I've said so far. So for the Q&A, before I open it up and we get to the Q&A, I wanted to first share in the chat, in case we don't get to all the questions or you have questions you come up with after this session. My email address, you can always write to me directly if you have questions that you don't get to ask right now. And then these are not the questions that we're going to go through. These are just suggestions of themes for the questions that you might have. If you have more questions about what the initiatives are, whether you have doubts about whether your project or program that you're thinking about qualifies, you can ask about that, whether it relates to the theme, and about the activities, the timeline, the funding support, all of that. So I'm now going to open it up. I would say if you have questions, use the raise hand feature and unmute yourself, and maybe introduce yourself very briefly, just to say where you are located and whether you're a CHCI member, just to give us a sense of who's attending here. Let me stop the sharing, and then there we go. Let's see. I see Russ has his hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Guillaume. Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Aaron. I'm Russ Castronovo from University of Wisconsin-Madison. I had 3 quick questions that I wanted to pose. In your presentation, you emphasized global a lot. And I was thinking of, I was talking with my mentee, because I'm part of the mentor program. And we thought this would be a good way to deepen that relationship. But that's kind of a more local pairing. And I wanted to see if that was acceptable or if that kind of trespasses on anything.
So it's a very good question because that's something I should have pointed out when I talked about the difference with the GHI, because the GHIs were mandatorily global in the collaborations that they entailed. This is different. We still very much want to encourage global participation and global collaboration, and this might be something we take into account when funding support is requested. But the answer to your question is yes, if your collaboration is domestic and local, that your program or project still qualifies. And one of the reasons for that too is that we want to be able to include a program that might be public humanities programs that are dealing locally with a global issue and that are turned toward their local community. So yes, to your question, this would qualify.
And then just two quick funding questions, if I may. First is, with the match, does that mean if you're applying for $15,000 tier, that you need to have a match of $15,000, or do you have a match of $7,500 to make it to 15?
No, it means that you need to bring 15 if you're asking for 15. So
Okay.
on the form, you will see that when you select one of those, there is something that opens up. There is more that's coming, and that's asking about the status of your match, because we wanted people who first need to hear from us that we were interested in that project to then be able to go to whoever, their dean or whoever it is, in order to say, well, we're going to be part of this, we're going to receive this, can you provide a match? So if you don't have secured your match, you can still apply, and we'll look at that and take it into account.
And then just one last question. Sorry if I'm monopolizing this here. Can the match come from with our existing budget? Can we indicate that that would be the case?
Yes, that's fine. So you will see on the form that the limitations for the match is that it cannot be in kind, and it cannot be extramural, in the sense that we don't want to build on the grant of someone else in order to extend it, if that makes sense. Sometimes our own grants, which would make no sense in some way. So these are the two limitations about matches.
Got it.
Good afternoon. I'm Kekeli Nuviadenu.
Please, if I may, there was Laura, do you want to?
Oh, no, I can
Okay.
go after, no problem.
So please go ahead. Use the raise hand feature so that we can have a queue, if you can. But go ahead, Kekeli.
Okay, yes, I'm at Bethune-Cookman University in Daytona Beach, Florida. In the College of Arts and Humanities, we have 9 different departments, and we are not a member yet, and we're looking into becoming member. I have a few questions here. The first one is there an existing list of members that, if we want to collaborate on the projects, that we can look into? And then
So the quick answer is yes, there is. I'm going to ask Aaron if he can paste a link to our membership directory where you can actually use various menus to filter and look by countries and state who our members are.
Okay.
So that resource is there. I see that Aaron has posted about the tiers as well. If you're in doubt about what your tier might be, you can ask him. I see some question in the chat. I'll try to get back to them, or raise your hand to ask it directly. Go ahead.
Currently, yes, we don't have a center. We have a Humanities Advisory Council board, but we don't have a center, and so that's something we also would want clarification whether. And I know you mentioned it that yes, you're open to accepting programs into the membership, so that's something I would need clarification on.
So that's something I'm going to send to Aaron as well, but to give you the very short answer, we have members that are not centers in institute, and that's for a range of reasons, especially when we look outside of the US. There are many places there, the form of the organization is not a center, and there are members, so in different parts of the world. But even in the United States, there are some members that are at the college level because of the nature of their institution. So that's something that we've done. The second thing I'd say is that in addition to the tiers that Aaron has pasted here, we have now a tier 0, which is something that we've created for organization and center with a very, very low budget. in which there is no membership fee. But you can reach out to Aaron to learn more about that. But knowing what your institution is, I would say, yes, they could become a member of CHCI. That's the short answer.
Okay. And then finally, when we are designing the program or looking into the program, is it open to both faculty and students to participate, or is solely faculty?
Yes, so maybe I should have also made a list of things that have not changed since the GHI, and it's somewhere on the website. You'll see it. I think on the above the participation form, there are some. I don't know if I don't recall if there are requirements or strong encouragements to involve early career scholars. So it's not just faculty. This is something that the GHI had done and that we want to maintain, which is to try as much as possible to maintain half of the participation, and by that I mean actual individual participating in the programs, being early career scholars, which can include very young, I mean not necessarily young, but recent faculty or doctoral students. So that's something that we still encourage very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Laura, you were in the
Yes.
queue. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. I have two quick questions. One is actually about what Aaron just dropped in the chat about the budget limit in terms of the payment of honoraria. And I know you and I talked about this in Berkeley, that the goal of that was to avoid like a tenured faculty speaker series. But I'm just wondering if it would be possible to have in writing what we talked about, that if you are imagining a partnership with community members or artists or advocates where payment to them for their consultation or that kind of form of honoraria where it's not part of the academic prestige network, but it's about recognizing the labor of experts that are outside the academy, if that would be permitted to be a substantial portion of your budget, or if it's really like, if that, honoraria is honoraria and you're not thinking of it differently in that way.
No, it could be. It seems acceptable to do that. So yeah, I know we talked about it. I'm not sure what you mean by in writing, but yes, we'd be happy to support that. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about the red tape. So of how you figure this out locally on the campus in order to be able to pay those honorarium. I know that sometimes in some places it's complicated to do that, but the answer is yes, this would be acceptable.
Oh, by in writing, I just meant it says less than half of the proposed budget should be dedicated to the payment of honoraria, but.
Yeah, so if we're in the case of a public humanities program, is that what we're talking about?
Right, yes, or like a community partnership, yeah.
It would be understandable that in this case, the focus being just that, not just that, but that it would be a big part of the project itself. It would make sense that to make an exception to this rule, which you understand it has a different purpose.
Okay, cool. And then my second question is about extramural funding and the restriction on that. And I'm thinking specifically of centers and institutions that are in unfriendly states or with unfriendly institutions, where often focusing on social justice is either explicitly prohibited, like in places like Iowa, or just not a priority of the administration. And so the way that centers are able to build programs around some of the global challenges that you're thinking about is to use extramural funding to do that. So I'm just curious, could you say more about the motivation behind the restriction on extramural funding, and whether it would just be a matter of articulating a different facet of the project than what is already funded by extramural funding, and if that would be one way to slice that?
Yeah, I think like in the case of the honoraria, as long as you provide an explanation as to why what you're proposing is different from what we're asking, I think there can be an understanding. This is not the goal is not to make things like the ones you described not possible. The goal is different, obviously, for requiring that the matches come from internal budgets, and again, the matches are geared toward wealthier members of CHCI. So was that your last question?
Yes, thank you.
I think Sherry, who was in the queue, her question is kind of related to this.
Yes, so I had asked Aaron in the chat, so U of M is a tier 3 institution, and I'm just wondering your thoughts if there's preclusions around like a tier 3 asking for 25, even if we match, say, 50, so the total budget is 75, or if you're trying to like really prioritize the lower budget kind of institutions so that you'd prefer a tier 3 apply only for like $5,000 or $10,000.
No, I'll tell you what we prefer. We prefer tier 3 to match $25,000, even more if they want, and to propose a project that's collaborative with tier 0 and tier 1 members. That's what we would really like to see. So we're not, absolutely not. So I hope I didn't give that sense. Trying to discourage tier 2 and 3 members to apply only for smaller projects. On the contrary, it's our hope that they will be able to provide the match, which on our end means that we have more of our budget that we can distribute to support more projects that are going to be smaller. So yes, absolutely, you could and feel free to have matches that go beyond what we're asking. We're happy to do that.
Okay, then my second question is, are there any preclusions around partnering with an institution where a current board member is a member of that institution?
So I would say the only limitation that I can see to that is if that board member is a member of the committee that's going to look at the selection. We actually don't know who they're going to be yet, so that would be a very individual specific question. So I think that's the only limitation that I can think of.
Thank you.
Do we have more questions? Aaron, I wasn't looking at the chat too carefully, but I'm hoping that questions that were there were answered.
Yeah, no, in short.
Okay. All right. So we are at time. We're at 10:45. We're a couple of minutes behind. I'm glad we could answer some questions. I'm sure that there will be more coming. Again, you can email me. That was in the chat there, but you can also find my address on the website. If you have more questions, please don't hesitate. Again, if you just want to participate, what you have to provide is very, very brief, especially if you already have a program and want to join. It's basically a description of what you're already doing. So we're excited about this and to share more about what the activities are going to be. We'll do that as we get close to the end of the year, and we'll be happy to share more and to receive your submissions, and hope to have as many people participating in this, because the outcome and the power of this initiative is going to come from how many of you participate and are there to network and build collaborative projects around those themes. Thank you very much. Stephen, do you have you're muted.
I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for joining the meeting and for taking your interest in initiatives. Have a good day.